defeat the radicals, the moderates were devoured by the radicals. And I regret to say that international troops like UNIFIL in Lebanon and UBAM in Gaza didn't stop the radicals from attacking Israel. We left Gaza hoping for peace. We did freeze the settlements in Gaza. We uprooted them. We did exactly what the theory says. Get out, go back to the 1967 borders, dismantle the settlements. And I don't think people remember how far we went to achieve this. We uprooted thousands of people from their homes. We pulled children out of their schools and their kindergartens. We bulldozed synagogues. We even moved loved ones from their graves. And then, having done all that, we gave the keys of Gaza to President Abbas. Now, the theory says it should all work out. And President Abbas and the Palestinian Authority now could build a peaceful state in Gaza. You can remember that the entire world applauded. They applauded our withdrawal as an act of great statesmanship, as a bold act of peace. But ladies and gentlemen, we didn't get peace. We got war. We got Iran, which through its proxy Hamas promptly kicked out the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority collapsed in a day, in one day. President Abbas just said on this podium that the Palestinians are armed only with their hopes and dreams. Yep, hopes, dreams, and 10,000 missiles and Grad rockets supplied by Iran, not to mention the river of lethal weapons now flowing into Gaza from the Sinai, from Libya, and from elsewhere. Thousands of missiles have already rained down on our cities. So you might understand that given all this, Israelis rightly ask, what's to prevent this from happening again in the West Bank? See, most of our major cities in the south of the country are within a few dozen kilometers from Gaza. But in the center of the country, opposite the West Bank, our cities are a few hundred meters or at most a few kilometers away from the edge of the West Bank. So I want to ask you, would any of you bring danger so close to your cities, to your families? Would you act so recklessly with the lives of your citizens? Israel is prepared to have a Palestinian state in the West Bank, but we're not prepared to have another Gaza there. And that's why we need to have real security arrangements, which the Palestinians simply refuse to negotiate with us. Israelis remember the bitter lessons of Gaza. Many of Israel's critics ignore them. They irresponsibly advise Israel to go down this same perilous path again. You read what these people say, and it's as if nothing happened. Just keep repeating the same advice, the same formulas, as though none of this happened. And these critics continue to press Israel to make far-reaching concessions without first assuring Israel's security. They praise those who unwittingly feed the insatiable crocodile of militant Islam as bold statesmen. They cast as enemies of peace those of us who insist that we must first erect a sturdy barrier to keep the crocodile out, or at the very least, jam an iron bar between its gaping jaws. So in the face of the labels and the libels, Israel must heed better advice. Better a bad press than a good eulogy. And better still would be a fair press, whose sense of history extends beyond breakfast, and which recognizes Israel's legitimate security concerns. I believe that in serious peace negotiations, these needs and concerns can be properly addressed. But they will not be addressed without negotiations. And the needs are many, because Israel is such a tiny country. Without Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, Israel is all of 9 miles wide. I want to put it for you in perspective, because you're all in this city. That's about 2/3 the length of Manhattan. It's the distance between Battery Park and Columbia University. And don't forget that the people who live in Brooklyn and New Jersey are considerably nicer than some of Israel's neighbors. So how do you protect such a tiny country, surrounded by people sworn to its destruction and armed to the teeth by Iran? Obviously, you can't defend it from within that narrow space alone. Israel needs greater strategic depth. And that's exactly why Security Council Resolution 242 didn't require Israel to leave all the territories it captured in the Six-Day War. It talked about withdrawal from territories to secure and defensible boundaries. And to defend itself, Israel must therefore maintain a long-term Israeli military presence in critical strategic areas in the West Bank. Now, I explained this to President Abbas. He answered that if a Palestinian state was to be a sovereign country, it could never accept such arrangements. Why not? America has had troops in Japan, Germany, and South Korea for more than half a century. Britain has had an airspace in Cyprus, or rather an airbase in Cyprus. France has forces in 3 independent African nations. None of these states claim that they're not sovereign countries. And there are many other vital security issues that also must be addressed. Take the issue of airspace. Again, Israel's small dimensions create huge security problems. America can be crossed by jet airplane in 6 hours. To fly across Israel, it takes 3 minutes. So is Israel's tiny airspace to be chopped in half and given to a Palestinian state not at peace with Israel? Our major international airport is a few kilometers away from the West Bank. Without peace, will our planes become targets for anti-aircraft missiles placed in the adjacent Palestinian state? And how will we stop the smuggling into the West Bank? It's not merely the West Bank, it's the West Bank mountains. It just dominates the coastal plain where most of Israel's population sits below. How could we prevent the smuggling into these mountains of those missiles that could be fired on our cities? I bring up these problems because they're not theoretical problems. They're very real. And for Israelis, they're life and death matters. All these potential cracks in Israel's security have to be sealed in a peace agreement before a Palestinian state is declared, not afterwards. Because if you leave it afterwards, they won't be sealed. And these problems will explode in our face and explode the peace. The Palestinians should first make peace with Israel and then get their state. But I also want to tell you this. After such a peace agreement is signed, Israel will not be the last country to welcome a Palestinian state as a new member of the United Nations. We will be the first And there's one more thing. Hamas has been violating international law by holding our soldier Gilad Shalit captive for 5 years. They haven't given even one Red Cross visit. He's held in a dungeon in darkness against all international norms. Gilad Shalit is the son of Aviva and Noam Shalit. He is the grandson of Tzvi Shalit, who escaped the Holocaust by coming to in the 1930s as a boy to the land of Israel. Gilad Shalit is the son of every Israeli family. Every nation represented here should demand his immediate release. If you want to pass a resolution about the Middle East today, that's the resolution you should pass. Ladies and gentlemen, last year in Israel, in Bar Ilan University, this year in the Knesset and in the U.S. Congress, I laid out my vision for peace, in which a demilitarized Palestinian state recognizes the Jewish state. Yes, the Jewish state. After all, this is the body that recognized the Jewish state 64 years ago. Now, don't you think it's about time the Palestinians did the same? The Jewish state of Israel will always protect the rights of all its minorities, including the more than 1 million Arab citizens of Israel. I wish I could say the same thing about a future Palestinian state. For as Palestinian officials made clear the other day, in fact, I think they made it right here in New York, they said the Palestinian state won't allow any Jews in it. They'll be Jew-free. Judenrein. That's ethnic cleansing. There are laws today in Ramallah that make the selling of land to Jews punishable by death. That's racism. And you know which laws this evokes. Israel has no intention whatsoever to change the democratic character of our state. We just don't want the Palestinians to try to change the Jewish character of our state. We want to give up we want them to give up the fantasy of flooding Israel with millions of Palestinians. President Abbas just stood here and he said that the core of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the settlements. Well, that's odd. Our conflict has been was raging for nearly half a century before there was a single Israeli settlement in the West Bank. So if what President Abbas is saying was true, then I guess that the settlements he's talking about are Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jaffa, Beersheba. Maybe that's what he meant the other day when he said that Israel has been occupying Palestinian land for 63 years. He didn't say from 1967, he said from 1948. I hope somebody will bother to ask him this question, because it illustrates a simple truth. The core of the conflict is not the settlements. The settlements are a result of the conflict.